Hi, it's Michael Kerr here, presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, I interview a fellow small business owner or an expert, and they share their stories, their lived experiences, the wins and the losses, and their best advice to help you, the listener, get the most you can from your own business. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. And thanks also to Kerr Capital, supporters of the show. So welcome into another edition of the Small Business Podcast. I'm really pleased to have in Sir Steven Wilkinson, who's the founder of Good and Prosper. And Steven, welcome in firstly, Steven.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be on your show.
Good and Prosper, your business it's a knowledge business for entrepreneurs and business owners, and it's all about helping them become fluent in the language of business. And your objective is to get them fluent in the language of business, and from there, achieve create much more lasting success and prosperity as a business owner. So we're right on board with that at Small Business Banter, and you do that practically by, and we'll talk about some of the things you do practically, but to build the financial knowledge that you think these owners need. So before I hand over to Steven to talk about his background, I just wanted to, for listeners, just talk about some of the themes which are really paramount in my opinion on the ongoing success of small businesses individually, but also of collectively the SME economy. So we're going to be chatting about the traditional approach to managing finances in a typical small business, and what not doing that well is costing owners. We're going to talk about financial literacy, which doesn't equal accounting proficiency. We're going to talk about the upside in when you do get to the point where you can listen to your business numbers and understand the story that the numbers are trying to tell you. We're going to drill in on the importance of understanding your business value, just like the listed businesses do. They track their business value every day. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to attempt to demystify some of the business finance terms and concepts, and we're going to kind of make the case for, which you do, for confident capitalism, Steven. So again, welcome. Could you give us a bit of an overview of your background, how it led to Good and Prosper, and what you're focusing on today?
Yeah, of course I can. Thank you so much for inviting me, Michael, and giving me the chance to talk about this subject, which, as you know from our previous interactions, is very dear to my heart and to yours as well. I am an Englishman. I was born in 1963. I grew up in a business household. My grandfather was I suppose what you would call a tech entrepreneur, who took the company public in the 1950s. So I grew up in a household that was sort of orientated around business, and there was a lot of business conversation. So it wasn't, although I had no understanding of what was going on, of course, you do get immersed in a particular way of thinking and talking about business, particularly if the company is a public one. That sort of seeps its way into every single aspect of family life. But anyway, my interests were more in literature than in business, and I studied German literature at Durham University. Took a second in economics, which I hated because I had a Marxist professor of economics, which to this day I've never really understood why you would want to study economics if you were a convinced Marxist. But we didn't see eye to eye.
Maybe
on
he was
anything.
open-minded, perhaps.
Possibly. Anyway, I thought the subject was I didn't understand it really, and I didn't enjoy it. And however, when I got married fairly young and fresh out of university, and my wife suggested it might be a good idea if I had some idea of how I was going to support the family, and I took a job working for an American bank because I thought it might be a good idea to learn some finance, and that whatever I was going to do in life, that would probably stand me in some fairly good stead. And there happened to be a job opening in the early, when was it, 1987, in the summer, to work for an American investment bank who had opened a branch in Munich. And as I spoke German, or at least reasonably well, and had a pair of hands, and could tie a tie and was reasonably articulate, I got a job as a rookie in the summer of 1987, about 3 months before the crash. And I'm absolutely convinced that if I'd have applied half a year later, after the crash, I would never have got into that industry. But there I was, and I started learning the ropes. I had to stay for 2 years there because they sort of invested, I think, $40,000, if I can remember, in my education, which was a lot of money in those days, and I would have had to pay it back if I'd left the company.
Right, so there's reverse golden handcuffs.
Yeah,
whatever you got to stay there.
So I had to pay. Effectively, what they said was that you have to earn that amount in commissions and fees before we'll let you out of your indenture without you having to pay anything. So I stayed there for 2 years. Didn't really like that atmosphere, although it was completely harmless compared to the way that industry and that particular way of doing business developed over the subsequent decades. Went into wealth management and got the job that I really wanted to do, because I knew that I wasn't actually going to master the subject staying where I was. So I looked for a master. I wanted somebody to teach me how this strange game of business and finance and investing actually worked. And I'd identified somebody who was sort of part of my group of friends who'd set up, who was much older than I was, but he was the husband of a friend of my wife's in those days. And he had gone independent, set up a wealth management business. And I knew that he was looking for a head of sort of investment policy. And that's the job I wanted. I wanted him to teach me. So I had a campaign which lasted about a year to try and get him to engage me, which was successful.
Yeah,
Sorry?
Yeah, so you really went after that job, and on the basis of wanting to learn something that that it really triggered for you. So yeah, that's and I can see already in that the exposure to the listed businesses where value is measured hourly, if not even more regularly, really stuck with you.
That and I think
such a contrast.
And I think the recognition that if I was going to master the subject, I was going to have to find somebody to teach me. And I think if there's one lesson, and I can say that there is not a day goes past that I don't reflect back in some way or another on the lessons that I learned during that really important period of my life, working for my first outstanding mentor. And if there's a lesson in there for anybody who's sort of younger listening to this, and that is, you really do have a choice as to who your first boss is, and you should make full use of that choice, because it makes an enormous difference to your trajectory who you have teaching you in those sort of formative early years.
Yeah, and I think on an ongoing basis, we've had on this program recently, maybe 10 or 15 episodes ago, someone who's fostering the growth of advisory boards and mentors in business. So, even as you move through your business career, you need to keep updating your learning, and you need to surround yourself, with people that can
Absolutely
kind of see it from a different perspective. So if we got back to where the one thing that really did trigger for me was your in our first conversation, the importance of the balance sheet. We have this everyday hustle in running a small business, which is about how many sales I've got and how much I got in the bank. And from my experience working with business owners, more towards the end of their career when they're looking to exit, it's often the first time they really ask the question, "What's my business worth?" And embedded in your approach, your philosophy, your education is this idea drawn from that experience with the listed groups that you need to understand on an ongoing basis the value of your business, and therefore you need to look at the balance sheet as well as the profit and loss. Is that a good sort of summary of?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I picked this up. I really don't know. But it was very, very early in my life. So a teenager, a young adult. And it was before I'd started in finance that I picked up an aphorism that stated that you can tell the quality of a businessman by the order in which he looks or she looks at their financial statements, and whether they look at the P&L first or the balance sheet first. And that I've no idea where that came from, but for me, looking at the balance sheet first was the mark of a true commercially savvy business operator. The balance sheet comes first, and then you look at the P&L afterwards. And that makes so much sense because the balance sheet is the long-term record of all your previous P&Ls. It's the aggregation of your it's your arsenal, your home base, the engine that drives everything. And I have never really understood why so many business people just ignore it as being almost irrelevant to their deliberations.
Yeah, like I wonder if I think there's a few issues at play here. One is that owners, in that hustle of day to day, just want to make sure they got another sale coming in the door. It's all about operational and very little about long term strategic. But I also I wonder that whether the role of advisors for small businesses has kind of fallen with accountants, and the quality of the accountants will determine whether the owner, is aware of and understands the importance of something as rudimentary as the balance sheet. So it's probably both owner and advisor. You were just
would you like me to comment on that?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
I think
be nice.
I think that the accounting profession is beaten up too much by sort of the small business owner commentariat, and I have had some very deep conversations with CPAs and owners of accountancy practices who say, we can only do what we are allowed to do and what we're asked to do, and we can. If you've been giving people advice and they don't take it, well, and we're only there at the very last minute to provide sort of the tax returns or to fulfill some statutory compliance, then we can advise all we want if we're not being listened to. And I think that it is at the end of the day, to use a cliche, you have got to want to as a business owner. You've got to take that responsibility and say, I want to learn this stuff. I want to know how it works and what I can do better. And if you don't have that mindset and if you don't have that approach, well, then the best accountancy practice in the world isn't going to help you if you stubbornly refuse to engage with what they might have to offer.
Yeah. So I gather that's a big part of your approach to educating owners and making them more savvy, because you've got to drive it at that owner level.
Mm-hmm. And there's
no, you go. I just wanted to let listeners know that Steven is talking to us from regional Ireland, rural Ireland, and I'm here in outside of Geelong in Victoria, Queenscliff. So it's we're you're very early in the morning. I'm quite late at night here. So So sorry, you were just about to add something.
One of my sort of business heroes is a guy called Jack Stack, and Jack Stack has been in business as an owner for about, I'm going to say 36, almost 40 years. He bought his company, SRC, which stands for Springfield Remanufacturing Company, out of the insolvency and reorganization of International Harvester in the early 1980s, when they were going to shut it. And he tells a great story about how he, as foreman of that business, took it over because he couldn't bear the thought of a business employing, I think it was about 100 people, all of whom depended on Springfield Remanufacturing for their income. He couldn't bear the thought of it just being shut, because he said, we're doing a good job. And he bought the company with, I think, 99% debt and 1% equity. He likes to joke that he was the most leveraged company in America at the time, having absolutely no idea about finance or running a business or anything. He was in his late 20s when he did it, and he is the father of open book management, and he invented a system called the Great Game of Business, which effectively teaches the importance of finance and sharing financial information with the entire company in order to get everybody on board and understand how to play the game. And he has one very short, pithy phrase, which is sort of sums up the foundational attitude towards understanding finance and business, and that he says, you've got to want it. And you really do. You have to want to know how to play the game. And it is a game. It's a game with rules, and it's a game with a scoreboard, and it's a game with an outcome. And you've got to want to play the game. And if you don't want to play the game, then all the intelligent advice around you and all the opportunity is going to be for nothing, because if you don't want to play, you don't want to play.
Yeah, no, and that's a terrific book, and I think a highly developed educational program, that I think is consoled around or delivered around the world. So, yeah, at the end we might just recap and shout out the website for that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this openness and transparency, from my understanding of that, it's also cultural, as to the kind of organisation that might embrace something as open as that. But in terms of motivating employees and driving business performance, it seems like a really great fit for some companies.
A lot of business owners that I come across take everything incredibly personally. It's all about whether they're failing or they're succeeding, or whether it's all about them, rather than understanding that the business that they're creating has a life of its own, and it's subject to, say, laws of nature or laws of finance that they can actively manipulate. There are things that you can do, choices that you can make. And if you don't know what those choices are, and if you don't know the rules of the game that you're playing, and if you don't know the consequences of the actions that you're taking, or that you're building your mental model of cause and effect based on possibly erroneous concepts, then you can you get into a sort of Groundhog Day of doing the same thing all the time, coming up with the same coming up with the same results without realizing what your options are. And finance, an understanding of finance and how things fit together, where you're looking at a very simple question is if you start understanding how your gross margin and net margins in your P&L are, how they work, how they come to be, and then start asking the question, well, how can I change those? Then you're right into the question of the heart of your business transactional world, which is your pricing, and your ability to create value. And we know that the very best businesses are extremely clear on the value that they're creating for their very specific target customers, and that's what allows them to create premium pricing.
Okay. So this is where the numbers you talk about it a lot in your own on your own website, in your and your newsletters, that the business numbers are telling you a story about your business.
Yeah.
And if you don't dig down on your numbers, you're not getting the. I'm intrigued at that whole idea that there's probably a story unfolding whether or not you look at the numbers. But if you want it to be a story that's a good one, dig on the numbers and understand them. And
I don't even think you have to dig very far. You just have to look at them. I mean, the very first rule of engagement with financial is just to look at them. You just sit down, take a pencil or a red pen or a red crayon, sit down, give yourself 3/4 of an hour, and just look at them. And if you're starting with this, and you circle every single word and number that you don't understand, you may have two or three pages full of red circles and notes. But if you ask somebody to explain it to you, your accountant, just say, what does that mean? I've got a reserve here, and it's got $18,322, and it's been there for about 2 years. What is it? What is it?
Yeah.
And the accountant would say, well, you remember that deal that you did about 4 years ago, and we weren't quite sure whether there were going to be some legal implications, and we took a reserve. And then the business owner can say, well, where is it? And the accountant will then tell him what that reserve is, and they can then either release it, which they increase, because they can ask the question, we need it anymore. But there will be at least 10 items in a proper balance sheet or P&L where the owner says, I don't actually know what that is. And you will find that there are reserves or capacities in there, or even liabilities that you've forgotten about, that you never really knew how they came to be in the first place. And the first act of engaging with your financials is just to understand in very simple language.
And it's
sorry.
And it's okay if you don't. And if you don't understand, that's progress as well, because you asked the question. Yeah, it's I do have a very similar experience on a regular basis with owners who are coming up towards the end of their ideal lifetime in the business they want to sell, and we take 4 or 5 years worth of profit and loss, right? And we put them on. I put them on one sheet of an Excel, and we just line them up, and we reorder all the expenses so that the highest ones are at the top. Really 101, but it's extraordinary how many owners, don't really know what the bottom line, looks like for a period of 4 or 5 years, let alone what it might have been last year. It tends to be, from my experience, let's get my compliance work done. Let's pay the minimum tax, and let's move on to tomorrow to getting another sale. Or so.
And I think you've highlighted a really important point there, and that is that the story of your business unfolds with each annual chapter or each monthly chapter. And if you're just reading today's chapter and ignoring everything that's gone before, then you are missing an enormous amount of narrative that just leaps out at the page at you if you have a simple spreadsheet in which you've got your sort of main P&L structure and your balance sheet structure underneath. It doesn't take much, it's about 20 numbers altogether. But over time, they will tell you, that's what's telling you the story over time. It's a narration.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the analogies you draw with the stories and books, and it's so true. There are business owners who are also, through their investments, maybe it's through their super fund or their housing, they track the value of those things, and they want to know what's a good investment, what's not a good investment, and it often doesn't carry over to the same way they approach the ownership of their business. So that was the first part of my interview with Sir Steven Wilkinson from goodandprosper.com. We covered a lot of ground. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. The key takeout was this idea of SME, small business owners, needing to become more financially fluent. And next week we're going to talk about how you might do that. But financial fluency is understanding the story your business numbers are telling you. That's at its very core. So in next week's episode, we're going to talk about Sir Steven's interest in The Great Game of Business book by Jack Stack, and also the open book management philosophy it espouses. The podcast for the full interview will be available after the second interview. Look forward to you listening in. So that is all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. I continue to be inspired, bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. If you want to listen to any past episode, jump onto your podcast platform of choice and search Small Business Banter. There you will find a diverse and fascinating collection of small business owners and experts openly discussing and sharing their experiences. For any of the links, resources, or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact me, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And it would be great to have you tune in the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.